All right, another great interview right here at South by Southwest. Kevin Kelly joins me now. Get a load of this. He was founding executive editor of Wired magazine. Let's pause there to note how badass that is. Okay, he's also former editor and publisher of Whole Earth Review. I assume that's some sort of crunchy granola
Hippie,
thing.
yeah, granola stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I figured you for a hippie.
Yeah.
His latest book is The Inevitable: Understanding the 12 Technological Forces That Will Shape Our Future. I like any talk of inevitability. Okay, so we will have that conversation in 1 second. But you also have a bunch of other great books like Out of Control: The New Biology of Machine Social Systems and Economic World. Love that too. And the one before was What Technology Wants. Ooh, what does it want? Okay,
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a little bit as well. So let's start at the beginning before we get to things that are inevitable. How in the world did you get into all of this?
So I'm a college dropout,
Good for you.
and I grew up in New Jersey,
Good for you. So did I. Where?
Westfield, New Jersey.
Okay, I was East Brunswick.
Yeah, close enough.
Yep.
So you know why I left.
Oh no. We don't brook that kind of talk about New Jersey here.
And I took all the science and math courses I could possibly take in my school, but I was bored and I really wanted to learn. I wanted to maximize learning. So I went to Asia. And I was in Asia for most of my 20s, traveling around, recording disappearing traditions. And I basically gave myself a diploma in East Asian Studies at the end of that. But more importantly, I caught a really bad dose of optimism.
Sorry to hear that. Have you been cured yet?
No, I haven't. It's gotten worse.
Okay.
And I saw before my eyes poverty, people in poverty lifting themselves up, making new things, new cities, new civilization throughout Asia as they transformed from third world countries into some of the richest people on the planet. And that was really important because that made me believe in progress. I really believe in progress. It's really real that tomorrow and today is actually a little bit better than yesterday.
Okay, a lot to unravel there. First of all, your parents, were they hippies? Were
No.
they happy with what you did, or they were bankers that were working in New York and like, what have we done?
Exactly. My dad, straight arrow, Catholic, and he worked in New York City, but he worked for a very interesting company. He worked for Time Life, but he was a computer guy, one of the first computer guys there. They didn't call it that. They called it operations research, which was basically what we would think of as IT. So he was involved in bringing the computers to a magazine. And I think about it now. Can you imagine having 1 million subscribers and no computers at all? Like cards for subscriptions?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they were doing. And so he was bringing computers into that. But he got involved later on into something that was really cool. He got involved in a startup with cable TV. You might have heard of it, HBO.
I have heard of it.
Yeah. So he was involved in starting HBO, and which was this radical idea of taking some cable companies and sending the signal to Appalachia, where they have local companies take it and send it to the cable in the vicinity of the hills. But what happened was they started getting people buying their own satellite dishes and stealing the signal. And then they eventually decided to scramble it. And then they got calls from the people in West Virginia saying, "How dare you turn off my TV?" And then they eventually realized that the real business was selling it to individuals rather than to local communities. And that was not the original idea at all.
I see. Okay.
So my dad-
And so your dad worked on the tech
My
end
dad
of it.
worked on the tech end of it. I think I maybe picked up some of that ease with some of this technology. And I heard a lot about publishing from the inside. He was not editorial, but I heard about how publishing really works, who the real customer is.
See, isn't that interesting that he's on the straight and narrow, you wind up becoming
Right.
this optimistic hippie, but yet he worked in tech and in magazines and you worked in
Right.
tech and magazines.
And I came back. All my life, I didn't want to do what my dad did. I wanted to do something else, completely that. But I wound up doing something very, very similar, working in new media and the tech side.
And you stopped being Catholic, but you became born again? That's what I read? Is
Yeah,
that true?
so I had an experience in Jerusalem that was very, very strong for me. I mean, I was atheist by that time, roaming through. But I spent a lot of time in Asia photographing ceremonies and traditions, and a lot of those revolved around the religious part. And so I spent a lot of time being around very religious people, and sitting in the back of the bus was lots of time. So I began to think about these things. And so I had a religious experience in Jerusalem, and so I came back, stopped traveling, and decided to kind of like, put my life in order and get a real job. That experience, I think, primed me for looking at kind of the long trends. And so the question I would ask myself is, this technology business, what does it mean? Is it just like a lot of the stuff that we're making? Does it have any kind of roots in anything? Where does it belong in the universe? Yep. Would other civilizations have the same attitude? Like, is there something bigger than us in all this?
Yeah, I look for patterns too. I don't know if I foolishly or optimistically believe that we could bring some degree of order to the world. Right? Order and chaos are always in combat, right? But that doesn't mean chaos always wins.
No.
And that sometimes the world is solvable.
Right.
So, and as you're traveling through China and all these other places, and you're getting a sense of how people live their lives that's so different than what you grew up in. You mentioned something there earlier that's fascinating. A lot of people look at what happened in China and they grimace and they say, "Oh, they took our jobs, and the offshoring to China is terrible." I've never believed in that, and I tell people, ironically, I'm too liberal in this way. I think that the people in China should have jobs as much as we have jobs.
Absolutely.
Right? And I believe the people in Mexico should have jobs as much as we do. Like, so Bernie Sanders and I have some differences there, even though I'm a huge Sanders supporter. And so I think the creation of the middle class in China is wonderful. Eventually they'll have a bust, and that'll create a lot of problems. But then I think that Chinese middle class being so gigantic might even save the world in reviving the global economy. What's your take on that?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. So the prosperity that we're seeing is not at the cost of our prosperity. I think there is no zero-sum game. And that as those jobs did move away from the US to China, they were just the precursor of the general movement away from doing things manually to automation. Basically, the outsourcing is the first step to complete automation with robots. And that's what's happening in China right now. By the way, Foxconn, the big factory that makes all the iPhones, has 1 million employees overall. Mm-hmm. And they've committed 2 years ago to buy 1 million robots. Buy or make 1 million robots. Okay.
If this was a movie right now, there would have been dramatic music that came
exactly.
in.
Right. And as fast as this is happening, of course, those jobs are moving to Vietnam and other places that are even cheaper. But eventually, where they'll end up is that they're going to end up in robots. So any job that we have today that can be defined by productivity, where productivity matters, that's going to robots. In fact, that's a job that should only go to robots. I believe that most of the jobs that we kind of fight over right now are jobs that no humans should be allowed to do at all. I mean, these are jobs that in 100 years from now we'll look back on and will be disgraced that we allow humans to do them. It's complete waste. Cashiers, truck drivers, these are not things that humans are really built to do. That's not what we're made for. We're made for doing things that are inefficient, that are creative, and creative means inefficient, and innovative. That's what we're about.
Okay, so now you're blowing people's minds. So let's reel it back in, all right? Okay, so bring it down, Kevin.
All right.
Okay, so I agree with you on the inevitability of so many of these things. So when people started then moving the factories to Vietnam, again, people's heads exploded, and I go, no, that's just a natural flow of jobs. That's exactly how it makes sense.
Right.
And yes, it is going to lower paid workers, and yes, they work under terrible conditions, but we slowly uplift those conditions, and that's why China's conditions got uplifted. That's why they moved the jobs to Vietnam, right? But that's not a bad thing that the conditions got uplifted. That's good, and eventually they'll get uplifted in Vietnam, and the salaries will get uplifted in Vietnam. Okay, we're all on the same page there. But the robot thing scares me a little bit because, and I'm very open-minded, and I think it horribly scares most people in the country, if not the world. Tell us why we shouldn't be scared, because where in the world are those people, all those people, going to get new jobs?
Right. That's exactly the question that the farmers in America asked themselves 200 years ago. It's like, with the person coming back from this era saying, only 1%, we're going to have only 1% farmers in America and this was like 70%, they're going to say, what are we going to do? And you would say, web designer, you're going to be hairdressers, you're going to be tax accountants, and they would not even register with him. I think that it's very hard for us to imagine what those jobs are, but here's the thing is most of those jobs are going to be created by our technology. We're going to invent new technologies which will create those opportunities for those new kinds of jobs. You might say, well, why couldn't it just we automate it? Because that automation and having AIs will take some time to do that. The robots are really good for productivity, for efficiency. A lot of what we want has nothing to do with efficiency. And that's what we're really good at. And that's what we're going to keep enlarging and opening up. Ballerina mathematicians, they're not efficient. They're not, that's not efficiency. Mm-hmm. Those didn't exist for the farmers back then.
Let me challenge you a little bit on that. So on the inevitability of it, I agree with you. Whether we like it or we don't,
right.
Buckle up, it's coming.
Right.
In fact, I remember thinking, however many decades ago, why are human beings doing these jobs? I
right.
mean, it's an assembly line. I mean, that's perfect for a robot. I just didn't realize back then that our technology hadn't caught up to that yet.
Right.
And I always assumed it was just a matter of time. We're not as good as robots at that, right? Whereas we're much better than robots at being ballerinas or authors, et cetera, right? But here's what I'm concerned about. All things being equal, there will be people who work hard, get a good education, and there will be people who don't like education for one reason or another, et cetera, who are more suited to be blue-collar workers. It's not any offense, it's just that's the reality of life. Now, if you take away their jobs, what happens to them?
So I think one of the things that we have when we have a world in which we have perfect appliances that are streamlined and work out of the box and whatnot, is we have this really appetite for homemade things, handmade things. The craftsman, let's say if you want a craftsman, will continue to have a role because they will be scarce and precious to us. And so the artisanal craftsman, the artisanal farmer who is making a little boutique, organic, this or that, they're going to have a great place. If you want to do manual labor, I know in case you haven't noticed, you're paying your plumber more than you are to your web developer per hour, right? So that kind of craftsmanship and stuff is going to actually become very, very valuable. And the kinds of things, again, that we denigrate right now, being a teacher, being a healthcare worker, a nursing, will become even more valuable. So the experiences, the things where we have a relationship and experiences, that's where we're going to be spending our money. That's where people are going to be making their money.
Color me a tiny bit skeptical about that because I'm not sure there's enough quilting jobs in China to replace the million people that Foxconn alone is going to lay off.
Right, but most of those people don't want those jobs anyway. They want to have a creative job. And so we were talking about the few people who don't want to be educated. How many of those are there?
I actually think there's a lot.
No, I actually don't. I think that most people who aren't educated regret not being educated. I think that they really wish that they had the opportunity or followed through or whatever. I don't think that they're happy not being educated.
Maybe I haven't run into them later in life. I know that when I was in school, there was a whole heap of people who had no interest in education.
Education as they knew it, I would say, yes, being in school, but that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think most of the education is going to be happening going in, sitting in rows and such stuff. Who wants that?
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about.
So, by the way, again, Kevin, I'm not disagreeing with you as to where the world is going, and I'm overall a very optimistic person. I just think that with all that excess labor, at least in the short and midterm, not having much to do, we might have a couple more wars on our hands before we get to a better place.
I think there's going to be conflict. I'm not going to deny that this is going to be friction and pushback. And I think there will be a period of time, and as we're seeing right now, with people who are uneducated and pushing back. And so I think that's correct. But I don't think the solution, and I'm talking about what the solution is, and I think the solution is going to come from more technology. So I think most of the problems that we have today are caused by technologies from the past. And the technologies today are going to make most of the problems in the future. But here's the interesting thing, is I think that the solutions to the problems that technology creates is not less technology, but more technology.
What is a problem we have today that's created by the technology of the past?
For instance, global warming, but let's take the light bulbs, fluorocarbons or whatever it is. So we made some kind of light bulbs use too much energy, or then we have refrigerants that causing ozone issues. So those were problems that were caused, those environmental problems, okay? Or we could have the problems caused by distraction, by the fact that people are spending so much time. That's a problem.
And you think the technology of the future is the answer
right,
for that?
Right, and so because I think technology is like an idea that's made concrete. And if I was to sit here and give you some bad ideas, as obviously I am, your response is not to tell me, hey, Kevin, you need to think less or stop thinking. You need a better idea.
Yeah.
So the proper response to a technology that's harmful or bad is not less technology, but better technology.
Okay, I hear you on that. And in either way, it doesn't really matter because we're headed towards more technology and there ain't a thing that anybody can do about it. So, I mean, like the idea of trying to stop technology is like getting in front of a speeding train.
We're doing it all the time. I mean, people don't want Uber to come into their cities, or they...
but they're fighting a losing battle.
Exactly.
Right.
So my message is that we need to embrace the technologies, and that the way you steer technology is by engagement. It's not by prohibition. It's not by stopping it. It's only when you engage in things that you can actually steer them.
Kevin, what could go wrong in prohibition? I mean, when we did prohibition for alcohol, that was great, wasn't it? And prohibition for marijuana
exactly.
has worked out brilliantly, right? In the last 50 years or so.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about what else is inevitable. All right, robots I got, and I know that I want to get into genetic manipulation of babies.
Yeah, right.
So we'll get into that. But what else is inevitable in the future?
I'll pick something that's non-controversial. Total surveillance.
I was going to say, I think that's actually a little controversial.
We are headed into a world where we're self-tracking, we're tracking each other with our phones, companies track us, governments track us. I can't see anything in the future where in 100 years from now, we aren't tracking ourselves even more and more and more and more. And so I think we're moving into an inevitable world where tracking is just what happens all the time. Now, the questions we have, the choice that we have, is what are we going to do about that? How do we make that civil? How do we civilize it? How do we domesticate it? And in my terminology, how do we make it symmetrical? Because I talk about covalence. So I think that's how we make it work. Because in fact, we evolved as humans in a very covalent world of mutual tracking. The little clans where you knew what I was doing, I knew what you were doing. Yeah. That was the natural, that's how we evolved. So we are actually comfortable in having that kind of covalence. All right? We're comfortable with it, but the important thing is it has to be symmetrical. So meaning that if I'm looking at you and looking at me, I need to know that you're looking at me. I need to know who you are. I need to know as much about you as you know about me. I need to be able to hold you accountable for it, and I need to have some benefit. We don't have that right now.
So I'm with you. In the old days, we're moving along in packs. Ain't nobody got time for privacy. Right? You're going to go to the bathroom in front of the other person, and then you're all going to have sex with one another.
It's
not like I can't believe Bobby slept with Sally. What are you talking about? We all slept with Sally, right? So that's, and then in the villages, everybody was up in their each other's businesses, etc. But then in the middle ground is the problem. That's my thesis. Okay, so you're saying we know who we are, we know where we're going, we know that where we're going to wind up is actually not a bad place, and I agree with all of that. What I'm worried about is the middle ground. So what happened in the middle ground in terms of privacy is Victorian rules. We're not in the villages anymore. When the cities, our communities got separated a little bit, and then now all of a sudden there's this thing called privacy, and people are doing things that are dirty, but now they used to be dirty, but now they're called dirty, right? And there's shame and guilt and all that around it. And we are going to get to a place where none of us have privacy and realize, oh, we're all perverts, right? Oh, we're all this and we're all that and stuff. And then we're going to be fine.
Right.
But on the road to that end, it's going to be rough in the middle ground. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, it is. And I think you hit on something. We have to. It's not just about the information. We have to change our mindset about what is acceptable, about what is normal for human behavior, and that's a big jump to go through. A big jump to go through. And there's also this idea that we think we can go to the city and we can leave ourselves behind, the old self, but in fact we really can't, because it's always going to be there, right? And so that's another thing that we have to overcome. And I think that you're absolutely right that there is going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth, a lot of hair pulling as people try to struggle with what this means. And I think not just this, but you mentioned, the genetic engineering of babies, and we didn't mention AI, but all these things together conspire to basically force us as humans, we're on a permanent identity crisis for the next century.
Yep.
What are humans about? What are humans for? What do we want to be humans for? And this idea of like, well, what's normal? What is really? We're all perverts. That's what humans are. And so that's going to be a really we're in an identity crisis. It's going to be a crisis in that terms.
Yeah, because right now, when our privacy is taken away from us, it becomes weaponized.
Right.
So what they do to Julian Assange, what they do to any opponent of the state, right? Is okay. You didn't use a condom when you had sex. You're terrible. You're this. You're that. We're going to put you in jail. Or just the shaming. I mean, look at what happened to Elliot Spitzer. So that's an example that isn't used nearly enough. So here's a guy going after all the big banks, going after the establishment, and next thing you know, we weaponize his privacy, right? And so we get into his life. Oh, and then once you say somebody slept with a prostitute, it's over. It's over. Okay.
Right.
So it won't be over in the future. Everybody will say, "Who gives a shit?" Right. But right now, it is a way of eliminating all of your opponents.
Right.
And so that middle ground is a dangerous, dangerous place.
Right.
And by the way, we're just talking about things that are in people's personal lives, things that affect the government. But then there's also the middle ground of, for example, nuclear weapons and climate change. There's some chance that we blow ourselves up in the middle ground. So what's your take on that?
Well, setting aside I don't think we can blow ourselves up. I mean, I think we can have international incidents, but this idea that we destroy the end of civilization with nuclear power is a myth. Okay? But it's not good, but I'm just saying that idea is a myth.
Can we just pause on that for a second? Why is it a myth?
We greatly overestimate the damage that a nuclear bomb does. Mostly it's like terrorism. It's the terror of it. It's the insanity, the fear of it that will cause most of the harm. The two bombs that went off in the cities were in paper cities. They were cities made out of paper and they just vaporized. But all the other buildings stood, the concrete buildings and stuff. And so the idea that is the end of civilization, it's not. It's, you could destroy, I don't know how many cities, and it'll go on. It's terrible, it's awful. But I mean, there's a myth that civilization ends because of it. That's all I'm saying.
I hear you loud and clear. You're saying the nuclear weapons you're not as worried about, but the rest of the cataclysmic issues of how we might blow ourselves up and climate change or others,
climate change
are you not concerned about all that?
Yeah, but you were going to like, in the long term or short term, we have a problem, and I do agree. We have problems. 49% of what we see in the world is bad and harmful and terrible. It's awful, it's crap, it's harmful. But 51% is positive. And I'm only concerned about that. I mean, I'm saying we have a 2% delta. It's not very much, but that's enough compounded every year to make civilization. So we can, any technology you can imagine we can weaponize. It's very easy to understand how we can weaponize anything we make, including privacy and that stuff. So the fact that happens is, yes, that's happened. 49% of it is going to be that way. But the net gain of a few percent is all the difference that it really takes to make it work. And so that's what we get out of this.
So Kevin, I love this conversation, but you don't actually know if it's 51-49 to our advantage. Because I often talk about how people say, oh, it's a competitive world, dog eat dog, or some people say, no, we all hold hands and we're cooperative. No, the answer is both, obviously. It's in our nature to be competitive and cooperative. And I roughly call it 50-50, but we really don't know if it's 51-49 in either direction.
Right, so here's my calculus on that, in terms of privacy in the short term, so there's a concern about what it is. And all I'm saying is, yes, it's a real concern, but I know that the answer is not coming back, less of this technology. It's actually, the solution is going to be more technology. It's going to be a technology that will help us deal with these issues of privacy. Okay?
And global warming.
And global warming, exactly, right.
Fallout.
So it's geoengineering, all these other things. We need more technology to solve it, not less. But here's why I say that, and that is because if you have 49 or 50, whatever that percentage is, if you just say, well, we have a problem, we have a technology, we make it, it makes new problems, we make new technologies to solve those problems, they just make more problems.
Yep.
That's like us running in circles, but here's why it's different. what we get out of all that is more choices, more possibilities. That's what's increasing over time. There's more and more choices, more and more possibilities. There's no technologies that have ever gone globally extinct. It's an additive process. We keep adding on more and more choices. If you want to live like the Amish today, you can. If you want to take your clothes off and go back in the jungle, you can. But you can also live in a modern life if you want. So we have more and more and more and more and more choices. And so even though like when the first hammer was invented by the caveman, whatever it is, that hammer could be used to construct a shelter, which was good, or it could be used to kill another human, which was bad. That was the 50-50. Here's the reason why it tilts into the positive side. Suddenly there's a new choice that we never had before. That's an undiluted positive. That's the positive thing.
Okay.
And so what we have is we keep increasing all this stuff, and each one of these is an undiluted additional positive because we have more and more choices. And that's where it tilts it in the favor.
Okay, so I agree and disagree. So let me explain. I disagree in that sometimes it's not just a matter of having more choices. For example, we have weapons in this country, right? Guns.
I've heard about that.
Yes, yeah.
And we're in Texas too. Right?
That's right. So more technology is
Right.
in the form of
Smart
AK-47s,
guns.
AR-15s, as opposed to bow and arrow, has not turned out well for us. Now, a lot more people die in mass shootings, a lot more
Sure,
people die in
absolutely.
homicides,
Right,
suicides,
right.
etc. So, well, you don't have more options if the guy with a gun killed you. Right, you're just dead.
Yes. So, well, as I said, anything can be weaponized, but there are lots of technological solutions that we could be implementing, from smart guns and all kinds of things where you know how they work, right?
Yep.
Which have been prohibited by the NRA and stuff. But so we have technological solutions to bring to that we could help cure that problem.
Yeah, that's true. And we're just choosing not to use
We're
it.
choosing not to do it. This is a political thing.
Politics
Right.
And all
This
that
is
stuff. Right.
and
Yeah.
so we are prohibiting in some senses that technology from happening, which is what I say we shouldn't do, is we should bring it on.
Right.
Because those technologies are there.
Again, it's something that I worry about in the short run and the middle run, but I agree with you on the long run. And my main point of agreement on the optimism is, if you look at a chart of, for example, average age over the last 200 years, it has exploded. I mean, we've at least doubled our life expectancy.
Sure.
It's hard not to be optimistic about that.
Right, that's just one of many factors. There's dozens. There's an increase in education. There's an increase in women's rights. There's an increase in science and living standards. All those things are on an increase. It's undeniable. This is across the board, left and right. There's a real hesitancy to actually admit that there's progress in the world.
Yeah.
The things actually are getting better. We're actually widening our circle of empathy.
That's exactly why I call myself a progressive.
Some people call me a utopian. Says I'm not utopian. I'm a protopian. Protopian is progress and progressive. I think that tomorrow will be better than today is progressive. So there's no end state. I don't want to be.
But you're
utopian.
on the road to utopia.
No, utopia is there's no end. I don't want perfection. There's no such thing as it. That's a myth. But we're in the direction of progress, of getting more and more possibilities. It's not a ladder. It's not a destination. It's a direction.
I'm going to grossly misquote Vince Lombardi's quote on this. But from what I remember, he says, we strive for perfection so that we might accidentally hit excellence.
Yeah. So I'm not striving for perfection, because I think perfection is inherently paradoxical by its nature. But I do believe that we can move towards the direction of increasing possibilities and options for as many people on Earth as possible. And that's what technology brings us.
Yeah.
So here's a little story to kind of summarize that. Is that imagine if Beethoven had been born 1,000 years before we invented the technology of the piano. What a loss that would have been to him, to us. Or Van Gogh, born 100 years or 200 years before oil paints and that.
Yep.
What a loss. Or Hitchcock before film. So there is today, somewhere in the world, out there, in your viewers, a young person who is the Shakespeare of our time, waiting for us to make that technology, to unleash her genius on the world. Just as I have and you have, we're benefited by the many, many people in the past who made the technology that are enabling your genius to be shared to the world, the to video and all that kind of stuff. And so we have an obligation to increase the amount of technology in the world in the hopes that it will liberate people born today or yet unborn to have their genius shared.
So there is no better case than me, and I'll tell you why. Whether you like me or you don't, in terms of the audience.
Right.
When I got started in media, YouTube didn't exist, online world didn't exist, so I started in public access because I'm an outsider by my nature.
Right.
So the insiders, the gatekeepers, were almost never going to let me in.
No.
If the internet and YouTube, all that doesn't get invented, I just stay in Arlington, Virginia as either just public access or maybe a radio show or something along those lines. But because the technology allows me to broadcast that to the world, now we have 180 million viewers a month.
Right.
I mean, isn't that amazing?
It is.
Right? So believe me, brother, I'm 98% with you, okay?
Okay.
So I'm just a little worried about the milligram. Now, one of the other things, though, that I think is a game changer, and I'm very curious what you think about, is the babies. What about the babies? We can do genetic manipulation in the womb. If we can do it, we will do it. If we can do it a little, we'll do it a lot. So I maintain that there's almost no chance that we don't wipe ourselves off the planet. Now, you can just say, well, great, we evolved, right? Mm-hmm. But Homo sapiens, as we currently are, they will look back, the super babies will look back at this however many hundreds of years from now and go,
yeah.
Poor sons of bitches.
Right.
They weren't all incredibly strong and smart and etc.
Right.
Am I wrong about that? Is there any reason why that wouldn't come to fruition?
I don't think you're wrong about the fact that we are going to do it. I don't think it's inevitable that it's going to be a disaster.
No, I'm not saying it's a disaster. I'm saying it's a disaster for Homo sapiens as we currently exist because we'll become extinct.
So actually, I think what happens is that we speciate. I think there are going to be people like the Amish, say, who would say, under no circumstances in any way will I or my descendants ever be altered. Mm-hmm. And so then you have a whole bunch of people who are saying, tomorrow, do me now.
That's right.
And then we'll have many variants of us.
But that's even scarier, because I mean, look at what happened when the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals were on the planet.
Yeah, right.
Soon they weren't.
Right. Although we don't really know what happened because I have a certain amount of Neanderthal DNA, and so do you. Mm-hmm. So basically, did we kill them off, or do we just assimilate them?
Look, we're of course somewhat guessing. The best science we have available seems to indicate we largely killed them off, though of course we assimilated some of them. Right. But that might be the fate.
Right, exactly.
That waits first, because we don't have much concern about ants.
Right,
we'll do, the roach motels and all that stuff in a second. If we've created genetically modified humans that are significantly smarter, I don't know what it means to be more conscious. I have no idea what that means, right? But they might at some point view us as we view monkeys that we do, lip gloss experiments on, or cows to milk, in which case the children of the Amish are not in good shape.
Right. So I do think all these things should be of concern, but I'm a little reluctant, like you are, to assume that we know what the past happened, and to assume that because we might have been in survival competition with the Neanderthals, fighting over the same food, that we wiped them out. I don't know what that situation was, which we don't have now. So it's not like you're stealing food from me. And again, our circle of empathy has increased over time. We treat animals very differently than we would have back then. Any animal we literally ate immediately. Mm-hmm. The idea of pets. Okay.
Although there's a wonderful theory that humans and wolves work together to kill the Neanderthals.
Exactly. I'm just saying we don't know, so I'm not assuming the worst of this. So I think we can be open to this. Let's go back to the idea of genetically engineering. And it's not just the babies, it's the baby's germline that we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Just to make clear, this is the idea that you have inheritable changes. Mm-hmm. So we're already doing gene therapy, but they're in individuals. So we'll affect your genes, but they're not inheritable. But once we start to do that, then you have something that can very quickly veer off into who knows where. So that is a concern. Now there's lots of people who have thought about that, and there are technologies that can help us to do it. There are theories about adding this on an extra chromosome, where you do all the experiments on something that's sort of set aside so that if things go awry, you can just take it off. I'm just saying that there are going to be technological solutions to the problems that this presents. Now, those technological solutions will probably have problems in the future that we'll have to deal with.
So I learn something from every interview, and so two conclusions I've come away from this interview, whether you like them or not, or agree with them or not, is A, we're done for. Okay, Homo sapiens are done. Okay,
Right.
it'll be Homo something else.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
And I'm not as scared by that. Like
Right,
some
right,
people are
right.
flipped out by that. First of all, they're not going to eat us. This is many generations from now.
Right.
Right. And they're not necessarily going to kill us, like you said. They can keep us around as
Right.
pets.
But before you get to the second point, I want to emphasize that we have invented ourselves. The first animal that humans domesticated were ourselves. We have invented ourselves. We are the first technological beings. We invented something called cooking, which was an external stomach to process food that we couldn't digest by ourselves, which immediately changed our jaws, our teeth. Right now, today, we are already technologically invented. We started to develop domesticated herding animals for the milk. We immediately evolved lactose tolerance in response to that. Something we invented, we changed our bodies. So we have invented our humanity. All the good things that we like and we think about ourselves as humans, the good parts, are things that we made, we invented. So this idea that we're going to make ourselves into something, this is not the future, this is the past.
Okay, Kevin, now we're having a trippy conversation. Okay, this is great. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So you're saying we bananaed ourselves.
Right.
So the banana didn't used to look like the banana, and we made it so that it could fit our hand. And
You're not the person wwho walked out of Africa.
Yeah. So, and I'll use all the wrong words here in an effort to oversimplify.
Right.
So Homo erectus made itself extinct by being able to cook, thereby creating the next species, which had the bigger jaw and teeth, etc.
Changed, yeah.
And the Homo sapien will make itself extinct by creating maybe something else. Maybe it's genetically modified babies, but maybe it's something else. So we're evolving ourselves, is what you're saying, like we did to the banana, and by the way, like we did to dogs. Dogs were the wolves that we partnered up with in Northern Europe when we wiped out the Neanderthals, and then they became domesticated and became all the dogs that we have now.
So we have a very interesting and tension-filled relationship to technology. We are both the masters of it and the slaves to it. We are both the makers and the made. Okay?
Oh, I love that. That's good stuff. Okay.
Right? You see? And so in 1,000 years from now, we'll still have the same tension. And the fact that we are making the thing and then we are also made by it. That's never going to go away. That will always be in the tension of our own basic being, is that we are both the creator and the made together at the same time. So we're always going to be having these conversations about how much control should we have or not. Okay? So that's our destiny.
So I would like to say hello to the Homo whatevers that we created. Hey, don't judge us, man. We were knuckleheads. We didn't have that much intelligence. We did the best we could. Right?
Exactly. Right.
Now, my second conclusion. You talked about options.
Right.
If we can genetically modify humans, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create dudes with 4 arms. We're going to give ourselves options. We're going to say, all right, let me try one with 3 eyes, right? Let me try one with X, Y, and Z. And then we're in a whole different world. So this is really scary to some people, but I'm in your camp, Kevin. I don't find it scary, I find it interesting. That's all.
Let's just take the example of the 3 eyes, just to make it clear. So that's not a really good example because you couldn't imagine any reason why you would do that. But let's say there's something.
I could imagine. I'll put one right here.
Okay, in the back of your eye. Okay,
yeah,
that's
like
good.
Abu from Simpsons.
I think to be able to do that and to have a reason for doing it, I think we're going to have some laws and best practices and etiquette about this. And so one of the things that would be, what I would suggest, the technology, law is a technology, by the way. So we would say, well, you get to try something out first before you put it in the germline. See how long this guy lives or whatever it is, so that we have some kind of sensible best practice about that. Or maybe you have to have 2 generations.
Yes, we will do that, and many others will do that.
Right.
And then somewhere in Asia, people go, yeah, I don't think so.
Right, and then the question is, how well do they do?
Right. Yes, that is the question.
Right, and so if they die early, it's like, we're glad we didn't do that. It's like the experiments that will work and they're beneficial, society likes, will be passed on.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, and so there's nothing,
Right,
nothing right or wrong about people with eyes in the back of their head.
Exactly, right. If it really is a benefit.
That's right.
Because there's so many other ways to put an eye in the back of your head besides putting an eye in the back of your head.
Right.
You can put a camera in the back of your head.
Right.
That's probably a better way.
We also invented GoPro.
Right, exactly. And I think, in fact, that's what I'm trying to suggest, is that a lot of the things that we kind of imagine that we would want to do with genetics, we may not have to do with genetics. We could do with the robots or other kinds of stuff.
Now, I know a lot of people are at home are screaming this question, so I've got to ask this next question, even though I don't find it quite as interesting, but it is a little interesting. So, any chance that robots take over?
In the way that people are imagining Terminator taking over, robot overlords, I don't think so. And the reason is coming a little bit back to what I was saying, that we are part of it, is that I don't believe that they're going to take over themselves, and I think they would have to be sort of made to take over, in a certain sense of we'd have to let them take over, is a better way to put it. And I think it's much more likely that we become dependent on them to a certain degree, or we're almost indistinguishable from them in another degree, in the sense that, as I said, I think are going to add stuff to ourselves. And if you're thinking of an AI thing that becomes really super smart and you have this singularity and it takes over, that's what I call thinkism.
Okay, what does that mean?
Thinkism. A lot of the singularities have this idea that if you make a super AI, an AI that's really, really smart, it makes another AI that's smarter than itself, and that makes another one. That's how it goes. And that all these things are happening because you have something really smart and it's thinking about how to make the next thing. Well, that's the thing. It's like, I don't know anything, particularly in biology, that thinking about it makes it. It's like you need to do experiments. You need to try things. An AI couldn't take all the medical literature that exists today and read it and cure cancer. You have to actually do experiments that would try things, and they take biological time. So the Ray Kurzweil and those guys have this idea that just thinking about things solves problems. And I think you have to do things.
So let me wander into territory I'm ill-equipped for. So this will be fun.
Right.
What if we were to program a computer to do A/B testing endlessly, with the capacity to take action and to build upon itself? Okay.
Right.
So one of those new robots that they have that functions very similar to human, walks like a human, yada yada, and we say, okay, we'll call it Bob.
Right.
Hey Bob, continue to do A/B test yourself.
Right.
And if you find something else that works better, rebuild yourself ad infinitum.
And I think we will do things like that. And one of the biggest verticals, one of the biggest areas that AI is going to have an impact on is actually not going to be robotics, but in science itself, in accelerating science discovery. I was talking about an AI researcher just yesterday, and we were saying now the AI has beat Go, the Go game, or beat chess, now it beat the Go master. Like, what's next? He says, actually, the problem is to take the four forces of physics and do a unified theory. He wasn't joking. He was saying this is actually, that would be the next thing. So having AI involved in science is absolutely inevitable and will accelerate things. But the point is that it takes time to run experiments. Even though they're doing A/B, they have to do a lot of them. And even though they can do it in parallel, it takes time. And if you're doing experiments on biology to cure cancer, you've got to give someone whatever it is, and they have to spend 6 months responding to it before you can tell. You just can't think about it.
Oh, I just got another great idea.
Okay.
The wars between the robots and the superhumans.
Right.
Those are going to be badass wars. Let's make that slightly real, though. So you've got those robots that are built now that are in pretty good shape, and the Defense Department is already weaponizing them. You program that robot and said, don't let the humans destroy you.
An army would do it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you could
right.
easily do that, right?
There's no end to way you can weaponize technologies. There's no technology that we've ever invented that cannot be weaponized. And that would be, can you weaponize a robot to do incredibly harm? Yes. Look at our drones. They're already doing that.
That's right.
Right? I mean, they're assassinating people, basically. That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
government-sanctioned assassination. Could we make robots do that? Absolutely.
The problem is when you give the robot the authority. So in the drones, there's almost always a person who says...
Right, and they don't have to, right.
Right.
This is the Kill Decision,
Right.
which is a great, by the way, if you haven't read that science fiction book called Kill Decision, read it, because it's about what happens when they have this thing. And by the way, Google and others with a robot-driven car are now teaching ethics to the cars, because they have to. Because they are making decisions that will have ramifications. And even though we think we're good at ethics, we're terrible at it. We're not very consistent. And what's happening is, as we teach the robots our ethics, it makes us better.
Oh,
Okay.
That's interesting. Again, we evolve ourselves.
Exactly, right.
Again, we are the maid.
So what I say is that we need AIs and robots to make us better humans.
Ooh, okay, trippy. Maybe. I'll give you a maybe on that one.
Right.
Okay.
Because just like children make you better, if you have children,
Oh, I see what you're
because
saying. Okay.
and so there are my
But
children.
sometimes it doesn't.
On average,
Right.
people are better after they have
On
children.
average, yes.
On average, and so what we're doing is that the thing of having to put our values into the technology will force us to examine ourselves and become better at it. In fact, going back to the AI thing, the AI chess and AI Go, this is an incredible phenomena, is that even though the AIs are the best, people say, well, that's the end of chess, who's going to play? But what's happening is that the people who practice against these games have become better chess players and better Go players. The highest ranking human in the chess world has been playing against chess programs. Highest ranking ever. And so the AIs teaching our values, trying to instill them, will actually make us better ethically ourselves.
Okay, quick aside on the chess. I never thought we had a chance. Because chess, there's a
Right.
finite number of moves. So there's no way humans could have kept up.
Okay, but here's the thing. You can say that now.
Well, I said it back then. The
Well, I
minute
know,
there was a computer
because-
playing
because,
against
like,
a human, I was like, we're done with this.
Fei Lee, who's the AI person at Stanford, says, are we surprised when the car can run faster than a human?
Right.
But I think people were surprised before it happened. They were surprised until the moment it happened, then they weren't surprised.
I know, but most people are knuckleheads. That's why.
I know, but no, it's not that. It's like, okay, everybody says, well, Go's never going to, Go is too complicated, it's too human-like, they're not going to win. And then when it wins, everybody says, obviously,
But
Go
that's
is a
the
problem.
history of humanity.
Exactly.
I
And
talk about this in the-
so whatever it is you say, well, what is it that and they'll say, well, robots can't do that, AI can't do that. That's a human thing. They can't write a symphony like Mozart. And then once
course
it does, they'll say, obviously, it's just something that
It's
machines
what I
can
talk about
do.
in the context of politics and almost every other
Right.
thing that where we progress. Change is impossible until
Until
it's
it's
inevitable. Right. So for example, Wolfpack, to get money out of politics,
Right.
our movement, Lessig, us, whoever else is working on that. That's obviously impossible
Well,
until
until
it becomes
happens.
inevitable.
Exactly.
And
Right,
then
right.
afterwards, I tell everybody all the time, they won't give us any credit. They'll say, well, that was obvious. Of course, we're going to take money out of
Exactly.
politics. But that's you were allowing legalized bribery to ruin the country. It was obvious. And I wanted to come back to the more important point about when we were talking about chess and how the robots make us better. Maybe they move the equation just enough. Maybe it's 50-50 now, and teaching the robots ethics like we do with our children, etc., pushes us to 51-49, 52-48, and hence we've evolved again. And that difference between 52-48 might be all the difference in the world between our competitive and cooperative natures. So we're building something here.
Okay.
It's I made it seem like it's both of our ideas when it's just your idea, but still, I feel like we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time to go back into all your other brilliant books, but I'd want to touch on two ideas.
Okay.
So I'm sure that we largely covered it already, but I can't help but ask, what does technology want?
Yeah. So that was the title of the book, and if you're maybe familiar with a great book by Richard Dawkins called The Selfish Gene. What Richard Dawkins did was he imagined the world through the eyes of genes. So he'd say an organism is really a gene's way of replicating itself. So the chicken is a way for the egg to replicate itself. And that he would say, with those spectacles on, he says, my children are really just basically ways for our genes to replicate themselves through the generations. But obviously, he would also look at his children in a very different way as well. But that was one view. So what I was doing was the view of looking at the world through the eyes of technology, even though it's not the only way to look at it, and say, well, what does technology want if you look at it as a system? And so while this pen is not at all alive, and neither is this table or any of the technology in this room, the only way to make this pen is with another tool, which has been made by another tool. And these cameras that are filming us, nobody here can make in their spare time. It requires a whole ecosystem of technologies. That whole system of all the technologies codependent on each other, I call the technium, and that thing does behave lifelike. It evolves. It exhibits lots of the behavior of evolution. What I'm saying is that if we look at that system over time, the technium as a system over time, that it follows the same trajectory that evolution has over time. And that in fact it is an extension of biological evolution. It's kind of the way, if you would imagine evolution as a process in the universe that's trying to fill as many of the possibility spaces of what's possible through heritable DNA, and then technology comes along as a way to kind of get to places that we couldn't do. So in a certain sense, what we're doing with AI and technologies are making kinds of minds that are possible in the universe that biology alone couldn't get to.
Okay, so when you look at that technium as it seeks to evolve,
right,
what does it want to evolve to?
Right, okay, so this comes back to the controversial part. So I would say it comes back to the same things that evolution wants. Now, asking that is a very controversial question, because in the biological realm, there's sort of two camps. And the orthodox camp right now, which was sort of most formulated by Stephen Jay Gould, is that there is no wants, there is no direction to evolution. It's completely 100% random, contingent, is the word they use. That if you rewind the tape of life back to the beginning and then let it run again, you get completely different stuff. There's another camp that says that's actually not true. That what we have in the experiments that we can show, that if you rewind the tape of life back, you get many of the higher order forms the same. So you may not get individual species the same, that's completely random or contingent, but you'd get winged animals, or you'd get tubular guts, or bilateral symmetry, or quadrupeds. And I showed this in my book, looking at simultaneous invention around the world, showing that's the norm. No matter what you want to look at, every invention was simultaneous. There were 5 other people doing it. Edison and the light bulb, there were 32 other inventors of the light bulb before Edison. Edison was just the one that worked, that marketed.
Yeah, he was better at marketing.
He was better at marketing. And also I looked at the sequence of inventions prehistory around the continents when they were separated, like in Africa, and the same sequence of dog, ceramics, sewing were the same. Okay, so that's true in technology. So what I'm saying is that the iPhone was not inevitable, but telephones were.
Yes.
The internet was inevitable. On any galaxy, any planet in any galaxy you go to at some time in their history, they had an internet. Okay?
That's a little further than I'd go, but I like it.
But
keep it going.
The character of the internet, who owns it, how does it run, what's the access to it,
how much porn is on it?
How much porn, that's not inevitable, that's the choice that we have. The character of things, the species of it. And so what I'm saying is that there are, in evolution itself, there's a direction towards complexity, towards diversity, towards mutualism. So I have a little list of all the things that we see in the course of evolution over time that is moving towards a direction, not a destiny, but a direction.
And so that technium will take that same direction.
Exactly. Okay. That if you want to know where technology is going, look at where evolution is going, where it's going. So what I can say with certainty about, say, 50 years from now is that specialization, that's one of the things we see. So whatever we have right now, we'll have more specialized versions of it in the future. Okay?
Yep.
VR, there'll be like 1,000 different varieties of VR in the future. So that's just one of the examples. Like you make a first hammer and then you specialize over time. You make a camera and then you have underwater cameras. Then you have underwater infrared cameras. Then you have high-speed underwater infrared cameras. You keep specializing. That's one of the patterns of
right.
life.
So then that brings us to two other fun ideas. One, it just as an aside, when we talked about internet porn in other galaxies,
Right.
I amused myself by thinking, if they reproduce in completely different ways,
Right.
what would their porn look like?
Exactly. I think the idea that porn of other planets is going to be completely unappealing to anybody else is going to be kind of a little buzzword. It's like, it's like you'll find no stimulation, eroticism in any other kind of porn on other planets. It'll be like completely
That's right.
weird. It's like that's
Like the Andromedan porn
Porn
is
is like,
just disastrous. Like no interest in that at all. And they're like, get a load of the Milky Way. What's up with that? Okay, I get it. Milky Way, 2 layers. I understand. Move on. As the technium evolves, does it clash with our evolution at all? Or is it on a parallel track? Could it be on a conflicting track?
That's a really good question. I think not, because I think that in general, what I would say is that what technology wants is the same thing that we want, which is one of the other reasons why I don't think we're going to have a huge conflict with the robots. I think we are moving towards the same thing. We want the same thing. We want increasing possibilities. We want complexity. We want diversity. We want specialization. And so I think those paths are very similar. And so I don't think there's a tendency to think that there's inherent conflict between the technium and nature, say. But because I believe that they both have the same root, that there actually is not any competition. In fact, we have not yet discovered or made a technology that we could not make greener, more compatible with life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's completely open in terms of having very compatible technology with nature.
Until, of course, we get to the robots fighting the superhumans.
Right, and I think that doesn't last very long. If it
Well,
does
either
happen.
way, it doesn't.
We don't have any power to eradicate life on Earth. We might be able to do some damage to civilization, but we have no power to eradicate life on Earth. That's just a complete nonsense.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
life, we drill down like miles down into the bottom of the rock of the Earth, and there's life down there.
Yeah, and so I was always amused at, like, will we find life on Mars or other planets?
Of course!
Of course we're going to find life.
But the question is, what does it look like? And my hypothesis, this is completely tangential, but my hypothesis, I believe that when we find other life in the universe, it'll be DNA-ish. Meaning that I think there's only a small number of molecules possible in chemistry in the universe that can do 2 things. That can be open-ended to replicate. So out of all the diversity we see on life, it all comes from this DNA. Mm-hmm. Giraffes, starfish, they're all kind of unfolded from this one tiny molecule. They all come out. That's amazing. But the second thing about it is, it has to self-assemble. Mm-hmm. It's a self-assembling molecule. There may be a couple other molecules in the world that are capable of unraveling that diversity.
Yeah.
But they may have to be engineered deliberately to do it. But I think there's only 1 or 2 molecules that can actually self-assemble into that. People who've looked at alternative DNA structures and alternative kinds of things have said that really this is a very small little space.
So that goes to your early theory about which branch of evolution you're in, right? That you think that it usually develops in a certain way, it probably will in another.
Right.
Then if we go any further with that analysis, we're going to get really metaphysical.
Right.
So
let's stop.
Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll come back to a fun topic, holograms.
Right.
Now, if virtual reality is going to evolve, am I eventually going to get to have sex with Dianna Troi in a hologram?
Sooner than you think.
Yes. Okay. There's been so many fun facts here. Okay. It's like the best interview ever.
Actually, if you want to see that, go over, there's a demo.
No, but I don't want that BS where she appears there. That's not that interesting.
Oh, okay.
So God bless, that's nice, right?
Right.
But I
want
want
the full tactile. The full teledonics.
If you want to use that word, which is maybe fitting. Teledonics is one of the funniest and dirtiest words there is, and very appropriate for this.
Right.
When do I teledonics Dianna Troi?
That's within your lifetime.
No, within my lifetime?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Sure.
Oh, God. What have we done? See, but that goes to your 51% optimism. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Until your wife finds out.
Yeah,
But anyway, and she teledonics you.
Right, and there'll be a lot of discussions about whether that counts or not. So
whether that counts, that's right. And then who you replicate.
right.
Will be a whole nother
But
thing.
it's VR is happening much faster than I was involved with VR back in 1989. I did the first thing. I thought it was going to be coming immediately. I was completely wrong. Here we are 25 years later. But what happened was cell phones. So there's the cell phone technology where the screens and the location devices and the processing power in cell phones was cheap enough to be used in VR. And so now we have something to show that there's enough there that it can be improved very fast right now. So it's what I call good enough to improve. So VR is now good enough to improve, courtesy of the cell phone, and it's going to go very fast.
So it's going to be some sort of robot that is then going to be put into a virtual reality situation, and it's going to feel so human, and you're going to be able to put somebody else's features onto that, whatever that robot is,
right.
yada yada.
That kind of mixed reality is incredibly, that sense of presence of reality. It turns out that we're very easy to trick in terms of believing that. Just like when you see a screen in a movie screen, you see like in a Mickey Mouse cartoon, he hits the baseball and the ball moves across the screen. You know that Mickey Mouse is just completely imaginary, but you really believe that ball is moving, but there's no movement at all. It's just a series of still images, one after another.
Right.
But that, you would swear that there was something moving. That moving is real. The same thing in VR is that there's all these tricks that we play with our circuit that we assemble in our own mind. VR is the only technology where we are part of the black box. Because it's happening inside our head, and we have this sense right here that it's real, that we're present, that it's happening to us. So when you come out of VR, you don't remember seeing it, you just remember it happening to you.
So, and when I'm in the hologram with Dianna Troi, there's going to be something moving.
Right.
That's for sure. So last thing is this, I want you to explain this sentence. I think it goes back to Out of Control, your book in 1994. Intelligence is not organized in a centralized structure, but much more like a beehive of small, simple components.
Right.
What does that mean?
I was writing about this at the dawn of the internet, trying to explain this idea of many small parts working in concert to make something that was a sum of greater than the small parts, which is what we see in a beehive or an ant colony, where there's behaviors in a beehive that are not present in the individual bee. So the bee has a memory of 6 weeks, but the beehive itself can have a memory of many years. And so how is that even possible? It's distributed in that sense. And so part of what we're seeing, this was the power of, say, the internet as a whole, was you could take unreliable servers and unreliable connections, and you can make a very, very reliable system. In John Gilmore's words, it would just route around the broken parts and automatically self-heal. So it was more like a living thing. Just like your tissue is sort of more than just the cells that make it up. And that principle is applied to intelligence too. Where's the thoughts in your brains? They don't happen in any of the neurons. None of the neurons in your mind, your brain, have any thoughts at all. Where does the thoughts happen? It's what we call the emerge. They happen at the large emergent level. They don't happen in the neurons. And so trying to pinpoint where the thing happens is a false question because it doesn't have an answer.
Okay, let's pause there for one quick sec. This is something I try to explain to my friends, and we debate with my friends 25 years ago.
Right.
Where I would say, look, there are things that are part of us that are outside of space. The concept of space.
Sure.
So where are our thoughts? If I close my eyes and I think of a black cat, that black cat does not exist anywhere in space.
Right.
And they're like, no, you knucklehead, it's your neurons firing. I'm like, no, I know it's my neurons firing. I don't think it's Jesus putting it in my head. Right. But that doesn't explain where I see the vision of the cat. Right. So am I largely right about that? That's a phenomenon?
Right. I would say that what sees the cat is their system. The system sees the cat. The system is not the neurons, the system is the whole thing together. That's sort of what intelligence is, the same thing, which is that it doesn't reside in any of the parts, it resides in the system itself. The only way we're going to figure out the question about what is intelligence and what is consciousness is actually to make them artificial versions of it. and which is a paradox because we can't make artificial intelligence until we know what intelligence is, but we can't know what intelligence is unless we make artificial intelligence.
Okay, that seems a little unsolvable. but
But
we're going to solve
that's
it.
what we're going to do.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. We're going to keep trying to make artificial intelligence without knowing what intelligence is. So most of the ones that we make are going to be wrong. But eventually we're going to make something that works, and that's how we're going to find out what it is.
So before I come back to our physical minds, the internet is basically the beehive that you've described.
Exactly.
So when every person that is alive on the planet today has already passed on, naturally or otherwise, right? They will have no memory of what happened because they're all dead.
Right.
But the internet will remember.
Right.
Right. And it'll have all of our collective memories, not all of them, but a lot of them stored in the beehive of human knowledge.
For the first time. For the first time, by the way. It was not true 1,000 years ago. I mean, only a few people had their memories kept in books, which will now move forward. But that's the great adventure, the great grand work that we're making, is that we can actually take all these people's lives that we'll track all the time and everything be recorded and actually keep that. And my version of what we're doing is we're moving into a superorganism layer. We're taking 7 billion humans, hooking it up with 6 quadrillion processors, running at 100 hertz an hour with messaging, and we're making this new machine at the planetary level. And that's where the AI is operating. It's not operating in little individual brains and robots. It's the big thing that will have thoughts that we're going to have trouble accessing as humans, because it's happening. We're the neurons of the big brain. That's where we're moving into, is this not just a poetic sense but it's going to be a real thing. It's a real machine that we're making, connected to all these people all the time, and we're part of it. It's not just all the computers, it's all the computers plus us plus the computers.
Okay, and come back to the human mind. So our intelligence, our consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is hard to pinpoint in space, or however you want to describe it. It never really exists. There is no Cenk, there is no Kevin, right? Because there's
no I, there's no central I. Yeah, right.
There was a 6-year-old Kevin with whatever neurons were firing at that time, and its collective consciousness of that, right? And there was the 16 and the 26 and the 46-year-old Kevin. And in a sense, the 26-year-old Kevin was part of what made the 46-year-old Kevin, even though that is different. And it is that collection of neurons and memory and experience, etc., that the mind is collected. And hence, that is your overall intelligence. Is that the idea behind this?
Yeah, it is. I think we are a process, both as humans in history, but also as individuals. We're the byproduct of a process. There's even a term in theology called process theology, which is looking at things as processes rather than nouns. So I'm very much part of this idea that we should look at things as verbs rather than nouns. That's the general thing.
Yeah, and so hence, we talk about evolving ourselves, even from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens and then beyond.
We're a process. Humanity is a process.
But we shouldn't be that freaked out by it because we evolve ourselves today,
exactly.
Right? And so we evolved, the 46-year-old Cenk evolved from the 26-year-old Cenk. So I already evolved myself, so it's not that crazy for us to evolve further as a species.
Right, exactly.
Right. Okay. So last unifying theme then is, my God, the one thing that is most undeniable and inevitable is change.
Yes. And mutability.
And hence, now I'm going to make this political, and I know you don't love politics. Right. But any political or ideological system that depends on things remaining the same, and whether it's authoritarian or it is rooted in tradition or culture, is bound to lose. Right. So in the long run.
Right. So the one thing I would say, I agree with it. One thing I would say about it is that not all changes are good. Some are better. And I'm involved with this group called the Long Now Foundation. We're building the 10,000-year clock, the clock that will take for 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. So we look at long-term. We're trying to foster long-term responsibility. So think in terms of generations. Doing something now that may take generations to finish. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep the options increasing through generations. And so while it's true that change is inevitable and instrumental and vital and essential, it's also true that we would like to have a way to transmit good things over time. Okay? And so to the question about, well, how do we make genetic engineering work? And one of the answers is we want to take what we think is valuable now and transmit it over time, which is very, very hard. It's easy to make copies of things, but it's very hard to transmit values over time. So there are some values, I'm sure that we could agree, that we think are essential, that we would like to transmit. How do we transmit those forward? So it's not just because they may be traditional, but because we believe that they're valuable, which we hope don't change. And actually, when we looked at the books about the great companies, that was one of the things they concluded, from great to good, or good to great.
Good to great, yeah.
Right, he looked at all the good companies and said, what's the difference between the good companies and the really great companies? They all changed, but the great companies had some core set of values that didn't change.
So this is as old as time. The competition between change and maintaining the current order and chaos, and that interplay, that orchestra,
exactly,
is what leads us to go forward. You can't have just change by itself.
That's chaos.
That's right.
Anarchy.
That's right. And so politically, change doesn't mean necessarily that it's a good change. It could be Trump, really bad change.
Exactly.
Right. But for those trying to maintain things as they are, that will inevitably lose.
Exactly.
And it might turn badly in some instances before it goes better in the right direction. And you're going to want to maintain some of the things from the past and have that interplay. That's why you have conservatives and liberals, because you wouldn't want to just have liberals. You certainly wouldn't and couldn't just have conservatives. Right. And that orchestra hopefully gets you to the right answer. But what is clearly not the right answer is we keep things as they are. Because whether you want to or not, you won't be able to.
Exactly, right. And so there is this, in the complex systems theory, there is this sort of sweet spot they call surfing along the edge, which on one side is chaos, permanent change, change for the sake of change. And the other edge is rigid order, unchanging. And what you want is there's a place along the edge that's kind of balanced between the two, where you're always falling forward. It's not stable. You're kind of, it's like when you're walking or surfing. It's a movement forward along that edge, and that's sort of what life is, by the way. Life is going along. The whole system I'm talking about, the whole technium, is along that edge of falling into either chaos, predictable, just mutations everywhere. Nothing is there's change for the sake of change, or everything is rigid, and you do the same thing again and again and again. And when we look at it as a systems point of view, life itself is on that same thin edge between those two things you just talked about.
So ride the edge.
Ride the edge.
So I think we're going to make T-shirts called "Ride the Edge," but like 7 people are going to buy them because they're the ones who made it to the end of this interview. All right, Kevin Kelly.
I'm sorry to
have
decimated your audience.
But. No. I love this. One of the best interviews we've had. Great talking to you.
Okay.
Thank you. And everybody check out the book, obviously, if you're not already super hooked, you're crazy. The Inevitable Understanding the 12 Technological Forces That Will Shape Our Future. But as you can tell from our discussion of his past books, you got a lot of reading ahead of you.